Hello! Thanks for pressing play and tuning in today. In this week's video, I'll be showing you how I photographed and edited my Photoshop composite artwork, The Wrong Dress. So first, I just want to talk a little bit about how and why this image was created. So basically, I knew that I wanted to make a miniature. And when I say miniature, I mean I wanted to take a regular sized person, i.e. me, and then shrink me down into a scene. And so the idea I had for it was to create like a bower for a satin bowerbird. Why? I think really because when I was little, I just was so fascinated by the idea of a bird that collects blue things. Like, it's pretty weird, right? And what I didn't realize as a child who was really interested in this is that the satin bowerbird lives in my part of the world. I didn't realize that, as a kid, you don't realize that things only live in certain places. I just assumed that they lived everywhere. And maybe they do live in other places, I'm not sure. But anyway, that was what I decided to create. I decided to create my own little bower and then pop myself inside it. So I created the bower myself. And the reason I did that is because I don't like to use any stock, if I can help it, in my fine art images. For many reasons, which I won't go into now. But basically, to create the bower, I got a piece of polystyrene just out of a packing box. And then I walked around my yard and found sticks and things like that, and then just stuck them into the polystyrene, arranged in a bower type shape. I did a little bit of research first to see what a bower looked like. And so that's how that was created. I shot it just in this little kind of gravelly bit beside the house. So I laid down a little bit of garden mulch first, and then just popped the bower inside and shot that. To photograph myself, I lay down in the backyard, and I knew that I would be lying in, brown mulch. So if I was lying in green grass and I then had to cut that green grass out, I knew that would be a real pain. So I laid down a towel first and then lay on that, just to get really nice, even outdoor overcast lighting on my skin. Now, the story I wanted to tell with this, so it was more than just about a bowerbird, is about a girl who is obviously collected by the bird and put into the bower as a little display piece. And I called it The Wrong Dress because us women really agonize sometimes over what outfit we're going to wear for the day, often asking whoever else happens to be in the house with us if it looks good. And I wanted to create this little story about how she'd chosen the wrong dress that day. Had she chosen another color, perhaps she wouldn't have found herself in this predicament. So that is the story of the wrong dress. Then I simply walked around my house and collected all the blue things I could find. So as you can see, there's all sorts of random stuff here, some Smurfs and a blue moose and a lighter and a soap thing. I wonder whatever happened to that. Tea strainer, some bottle tops, just really random stuff that I could find, and laid it out, making sure that I left a little space in the middle for myself to be composited in. So let's jump on over to Photoshop. So this is the base image I took of the scene. Now, I actually shot it in two parts. Why did I do that? Because if you shoot it as two different images, you can then combine them together and make the file larger. So knowing that I wanted to sell this as a print, I knew that I would have a larger file size by shooting it twice and then combining them as a panorama in Photoshop. Next thing I did is just cloned out a little bit of distraction behind her. So that obviously will make a little bit more sense later. It doesn't look particularly convincing right now, but that's what that's for. Then I blurred that background because I just thought it was a little bit distracting and I wanted to create some depth of field. So I've just blurred that background. Hopefully you can see that. Very subtle. Next, I really darkened everything up, but not so much the middle because that's where I knew I wanted the eye to go. So I really darkened the background and kept the middle a little bit lighter. Although I have darkened down the edges just to create a little vignette to draw the eye to where the model will be. Then I brightened that space even more to draw the eye there and started creating a shadow. So this ordinarily would sit underneath her, and that's why it's in the layer stack under her. So we wouldn't normally create this until we've put the subject in, but that's just how the layer stack rolls. Now we've got the girl. So as you can see, I'm a little bit dark, but I fit quite well, which was really just a little bit of luck. I did have to mask a few things, like I've obviously masked something over her foot to make it look like she fits. And I like how her hair falls into this bottle cap here. Next, I was just doing even more darkening, so really, and a little bit of cloning, I think, just around her, just to make that look a little bit more convincing. And I think this was a little bit of a mistake in retrospect, but I'll show you why later. Then I started doing my toning, and I really in this step was just flattening out the image so that I could then tone on top of it. So by giving everything the same kind of matte look, I knew I could then treat everything similarly. And obviously I put a little splash of light on her face just to draw the eye there. Now I did some dodge and burning, so that may not be super obvious, but you'll notice that a lot more detail is coming out of her dress. So I just painted white on the white bits of the image and black on the black bits of the image, and then dragged down the opacity just to bring out more detail. And again, that's a trick that will draw your eye to the subject. I haven't done it to anything else. Although I have in the next step, I've just dodged and burned a couple of things just to sort of drag the eye around the image. So you go to her and then you sort of start to look around. Next, I really darkened it down, and it looks like I used some textures for that. But then I'll start to play with light a little bit more in the next few steps. And then again, I've darkened sort of everything but the middle just to draw the eye to the subject. I've also brought out those blues a lot more by the looks of it, and I think I have darkened in between each item, as you'll see. Next, I added in a little bit of splash of light at the top, which now lights up the bower a little bit more and again draws the eye down to the subject. I did a little bit of toning. I think I look like I've added a lot more magenta in there, which sort of brought out the richness of the blues even more. Worked on the light even more, just added even more at the top there to guide the eye where I want it to go. That's a lot of compositing really, is just thinking about where you want the eye to go and making changes that direct it. I've added a bit more shadow around her now, so I think that she will fit a little bit better, although again, I think this might have been a mistake that I'll show you later on as to why. Really upped the contrast by the looks of things there. I think in that step where I evened out the tones of the image and gave it kind of a matte look, I was experimenting at the time with a matte look because I really like a matte look in other people's photos, but I really dislike it in my own. It's weird. So I must have done that and went, I'm just not happy with this. I'm going to add a lot more contrast. Use some levels to change the tones even more. I've added even more magenta, and I suspect that was just to offset that blue a little bit. Added even more shadow because there was something that wasn't working for me in the way she's lying there, and that's based on those changes that I made earlier. So we'll talk a little bit more about that soon, but now to me she's starting to look like she doesn't fit as well. When we first popped her in and did a bit of toning, I thought she fit quite good. Really darkened it down a whole lot more and gave it a bit more saturation. I'm probably hating the image by this stage because it's way too much, so I probably did a lot more toning to fix it. Started to do more light adjustment, so I felt like the eye was now going here rather than her. And a lot of this is beginner's mistake. So don't assume that I knew what I was doing at this point. It was really just plain experimentation because this image was created fairly early, kind of in my art making process. That one doesn't do a lot. This one here, I've just popped even more light at the top because I think, let me just step back a bit. Without it, my eye was just staying here, but I like to kind of guide it around the scene. So I just popped that in. So you'd go here first and then it sort of pops up to the bower. Some more toning, it's getting even darker. Then I just put a little splash of light through the tunnel. So again, just to make it clear that it was a bower because it has gotten very dark at this point. More shadows there because again, she still wasn't working for me. And I think these changes just made it worse and worse. Now I started to realize what the problem was. And this is a problem I've alluded to throughout. Her shape now looks like she's sort of sitting like this. And it doesn't really fit anymore. So to fix that, I started using Liquify to adjust the shape of her body. So here I've lifted her neck up a bit, which gives it a nicer line, I think. Then I have sharpened the image, so just threw that in there. I think actually what happened was this was my final image initially, and it just bothered me forever and ever and ever. So I actually made prints of this, and then I kind of went, I'm just still not happy with this image. So I played with it a bit more and liquefied her shape even more, and now I've really dropped down her hips, as you'll see. And I think now she fits a lot better. Don't you think that? Definitely. And she just feels more kind of shapely as well. And then for the final step, I've done some neck fixes. There was a little bit of a distraction there. See that? Very tiny. And fixed up her neck. So that is how the wrong dress was created. If I were to do it again, I would get rid of half of that toning and certainly would not have made the mistakes I made to create that shape issue. But it still prints up pretty nice. And I think it's a really, really fun story. Don't you think it looks fun to create these artworks? Because it really is. And they're so simple to do at home once you know how. If you'd love to learn, my course Exposing Illusions walks you through all the steps you need to create your own artwork from start to finish. For my regular viewers, I'll now be releasing 3 videos per month on this channel. So 1 in-camera creative technique, 1 editing, and 1 behind the scenes of my composite artwork. So I'll see you again in 2 weeks' time. Happy creating!